on like the transmission and like the infrastructure to connecting the where is it the supply is being produced, like for solar and wind versus where the demand is located. Because I noticed like in Indonesia, especially in the eastern part area, there's like a lot of potential, but unfortunately there's a supply demand mismatch. Like the demand doesn't the demand is too small, such as it's not justifying the number of supply and investment that you have to make in order to make like power generation, like solar or wind. It doesn't justify it. The cost doesn't justify the amount of demand, but and it's also not available to connect it to bigger grids like the one in Java because they're too far and too pricey. So is there like any infrastructure like TND concerns or consideration or opportunities that you guys see for some like big countries like Indonesia, or is there any like government incentives or investment that you guys would like to suggest in order to do that?
I think that actually applies to all power developers. It's not something that's unique to the renewable sector. And the main issue is always that where the demand centers are, where the urban centers are, for example Jakarta, land is actually very expensive. So to site a power plant or solar farm, you always want to look at areas that are cheaper, and that tends to be far away from the urban centers. Quite often, in order to develop a power plant and to connect it to the city, you need transmission lines. And the question is always who pays for it? Should PLN pay for it because they will be owning and using the infrastructure asset, or should you as an IPP developer be paid for it because you need it to evacuate your power to the grid? That's always a discussion that must be held with the off-taker and the project developer. Unfortunately, looking at it from the angle of a project developer, if I were to build a power line, that would be part of my capital cost, because it's very likely that I'll build it and I'll just transfer the asset over the PLN. It's not really my business to maintain power lines. I'm in the business of running a power plant. But if that's the case, then the cost goes up, and that would actually boil in the electricity tariff that is required. So that question on, what is the way in order to allow these developments to occur? It's really to have a very stable environment so that electricity can continue to grow, and so that these power plants can generate at a higher rate. But at the same time, it's really about pricing as well. We just need a high enough price to attract investments so that foreign participants, as well as maybe local participants, will be willing to put their money to invest in these plants. Thank you for your question.
I just have something quick to add. So when you say the pricing actually has to be right for all these foreign developers, increasingly a lot of these Southeast Asian countries, some of the solar developers, I wouldn't say those big utility scale solar developers, they are those smaller ones, they're actually thinking of going in to try to couple a couple of solar panels with all these smaller regions with just purely diesel gensets. Because diesel is really expensive. The moment you have some solar panels, at least to take off some of the load, it does help reduce costs, and the economics does make some sense there. Yeah, so that is a potential avenue, but it's smaller scale, and most of your big players will not want to go into a country and look at 100 small scale projects. It's a bit too costly for them. Really, quite a lot of these small startups or startups partnering with NGOs to do these things.
That brings me to the question though. I mean, like the last year that has been installed, partly the government also take place there, the one in Sulawesi and Sidrap. Like, is that how's that count to all this? Like, is that, so I guess it's economical in that case, or how is it?
I recall correctly, for those projects they had a negotiated tariff, so it was before this whole BPP thing was done up, because the projects started its development and construction far before the 2017 this whole pricing regime came about, and I think it was about $130 per megawatt hour, and there was some government support and whatnot. But more recently, I think towards the end of last year, when I spoke to some of the PLN folks, they stated that something that they didn't envision when they awarded this project and had the development of the 75 megawatt wind project was that there will be intermittency, because it's coming from really a purely renewable resource. And because they didn't envision that, once there's those intermittency, their grids couldn't really support these projects very well. And if I recall correctly, exactly the words he mentioned is that subsequent projects, they will want some form of energy storage to stabilize the load. Not the grids will face the intermittency and can't really support it.
Any other question? Oh, okay. That's
I think my question is for each of you. We're speaking about mostly in Indonesia, even though we are looking into several Southeast Asian countries, right? But if there is one or two things in particular specifically for Indonesia, how we do it things better, how we develop things. What are those one or two things that you would suggest?
You know,
Now you put on the spot, right?
You know, the easy answer to that is always, let's do a consulting project, 6 months, and we'll tell you the answer.
You can go asset this number.
Invite you to Indonesia.
I think one of the things that has always been a challenge for the government is just the overarching need for affordability. And I think that has always been the issue. If you look at what the Indonesian government has chosen to do is to fix fuel prices in order to keep electricity prices affordable. So there were price caps in coal as well as in the renewable tariffs as well to try to keep electricity affordable. But this sort of situation creates distortions in the market. When you keep prices too low, what actually happens is that consumption increases. You start to use electricity more if it doesn't cost too much. And the other thing is that it doesn't attract investments. Now the main problem is that eventually it will come to a point where demand will far outstrip supply. And you might end up in a situation like Pakistan or Bangladesh, where if you look at gas prices, for instance, they were kept at about $1 to $2 for a very long time. So demand kept increasing, but the supply never kept up. So it's in this situation now where they need to import LNG at $14, $15. So I would say the easy answer, of course, is to allow prices to increase, but that is, of course, difficult. So you need to think, how else can you achieve affordability without controlling the fuel price? Because controlling the fuel price is a short-term solution. It's not really a long-term solution in order to achieve the goal of affordability. So I would say you have to take hard decisions, but take the long-term approach in order to solve Indonesia's energy requirements.
especially this is also a political year, right? So if you want to increase the price, oh my god. Okay. Disregard that comment. Any other question? Yes. Oh. Pak Christian Tan.
I'm interested, have you looked into other renewable sources outside of solar and wind? And what are the prospects for those? Especially in like archipelagos like Indonesia, the land space is not necessarily there for a solar farm. And the other part is, you mentioned that the prices, the land prices in urban areas where the demand is high is expensive. What are the technologies, if there's any up and coming technologies on urban solar farming, maybe to the glass or other solar cells? Thank you.
Yes, I guess to answer your question in the land gas area, I guess if you still want to use the conventional, I would say conventional renewable technology, rooftop solar, that's really a way that it can come in. But I think based on the latest policy on rooftop solar Indonesia has, it's not too great to really proliferate rooftop solar additions, because the sale of electricity from rooftop solar into the grid, it's not on a one-to-one basis as per when you start consuming electricity. So that business case doesn't really work out too well. In quite a number of other countries, I think in Malaysia, they previously had something like this. When you sell electricity to a grid from a rooftop solar, you're getting, let's say, 50% of the amount you're paying if you have to withdraw electricity. And quite recently, they just changed that policy such as a one-to-one basis. This kind of slight minor changes can really help develop rooftop solar. And yes, in areas where there's lack of land, there's still buildings around, you can just start putting panels on top. And you have to just reference what Thailand is thinking of doing. They're thinking of adding about 10 gigawatts of solar just purely on rooftops. So there is always that potential. Yeah. And of course, the more of these developments that come about, the domestic expertise, the development costs will all start going down because there are more competition, more players coming in who are all competing to install rooftop solar, and then prices will come down. It will also help the cost.
How about the first point? The non-solar and wind alternative?
There were two technologies recently that has taken root. One of them that we highlighted here was actually floating solar on dams. And that was something that was highlighted by Thailand. If you just look a couple of months, over the last 6 months, they have actually halted the development of utility scale solar because they weren't sure if there was going to be grid congestion with the proliferation of solar panels. But this offshore solar panels on dams is a really brilliant idea. When you look at the land requirement, it's basically no land is required, and it's basically free, and it's already owned by the Electricity Generation Authority. And on the dam, it's really smart because there is already infrastructure that allows electricity to be generated to the grid. And the third thing that's really smart about it is that the dam actually acts as a battery. So when the sun is not shining, you can use the dam to actually generate electricity. So that's a really smart and innovative solution to solve a lot of issues that you face, like grid congestion, insufficient infrastructure, expensive land, and intermittency. So with that, we do see a lot more countries looking at the solution and thinking, hey, that's a good idea, let's look at that as well. So we do think that offshore solar would be one of the new developments. If you look outside Asia, offshore wind is also becoming a very big deal. And that's something that will proliferate over the next few years. We have seen offshore wind being applied in a big way in the North Sea in Europe. And that has allowed utilization rates of around 40%, pretty high, compared to the standard wind rates. 20%? So it's almost double. What is interesting is that Taiwan actually put out a tender for 5 gigawatts, and a lot of European developers participated. One of them was Ørsted, that won a large number of projects, up to 1 gigawatt. We expect to see that being proliferated in Japan, in South Korea, and if prices come down and it's low enough, you'll eventually see that coming towards Southeast Asia, especially Vietnam, which has a very long coastline. Thanks for the question.
Okay. Any other do you have a question? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one. So I think, can you go back to your slides? I think the one with the pie chart. That one. That one. So I'm interested on that first statement. So renewables are still in early stage, except Thailand. I know you mentioned a few examples. Of course, they didn't happen by just like that. Can you elaborate a little bit more? How did they get there? And how much advanced they are compared to the rest of us?
Okay, yes, I'll say yes, Thailand is correctly put, is more advanced in terms of where they are at today. But what is different, I guess, is they had that feed-in tariff premium policy first. So it's unlike normal feed-in tariffs where it's just a certain amount. It was a large amount that I think it was $200 or $300 above.
Can you explain the basics of feed-in tariff?
Okay.
I don't think every one of us understands what I mean.
Yes, feed-in tariff essentially is like it's essentially like a PPA that essentially the renewable company was the renewable project PPA. Power purchase agreement signed between the power plant and the off-taker. Okay, yes. So why this has to be called feed-in tariff that is added either on top of the on top of the whatever existing electricity charges. So in the case of Thailand, it was I think about $200 or $300 per megawatt hour added on top of the regular electricity charge. So you see, it's really lucrative. Correct. It's an outright incentive. You're getting a lot of money, and it's compared to just doing your normal thermal generation. And I think they had this policy since it started in the early 2010, 2011 or 2012. So you can see it has been around for quite a while. Unlike a lot of the other countries where things like the other ones, it's like Vietnam, they only did it in 2017. So they are advanced in a sense because they started earlier. And it's not that everyone started at the same time and they just performed better. Correct. Yeah, but over time, so they first started with that feed-in tariff premium, so it's something added onto the $300 added onto the electricity tariff rate, and then they move on to just a feed-in tariff, so they essentially lowered it such as about $100 plus $200, and then now it's just purely on tenders. Because there are enough domestic players and domestic developers and people doing installation, so naturally once the market has been developed, more competition, prices gradually go down. So tenders are actually getting quite good prices today.
Got a quick question there. That 1% and 4% looks. is there a? Huh? There's a.
Never mind, okay, I guess most of people in the room can't see it.
Oh.
So the percentage there is the share of each of the countries' installed capacity. What is the share of it taken up by renewables? Yes.
So Vietnam is really bad.
Vietnam is really bad. Yeah, 1% of it is from renewables. Yeah.
Okay, the next question. Okay, I would like, again, I guess if I may ask a question. So, because what is the prospect in terms of like biodiesel? Because I think, especially in this, as you said one of the candidates, actually both candidates mentioned it. Pak Jokowi mentioned that biodiesel will save the Indonesian economy. Also, Pak Prabowo said, biodiesel is very promising for so, in that terms, both candidates saying the same thing. What do you think in that department there? Like, how is it? And especially, specifically, interesting, they both say the same thing, that because the currently palm oil is very low right now, the current price, because Europe doesn't want to buy it, restricting the demand from Europe, so they're like, oh, why don't we use it at home? That's what both presidential candidates said. What do you think of that? I mean, because you still need the methanol to produce the biodiesel from palm oil, right? How's the economical view on that?
I think if you look at the use of biodiesel, it's actually used to supplement expensive oil products. So if you look at some of what you're seeing in the petrol pump today, if you go to the petrol pump and you were to pump regular octane, what's it here, 88 or 87, it's fairly expensive. But if there was an ethanol component of 5 to 10%, it actually results in a cheaper price. So that is one example of how you can displace the use of more expensive products with a cheaper renewable source. And that results in a cheaper cost for everyone. I think expanding the use of biodiesel is definitely something that should be advocated. However, there's still a limit to how much biodiesel can be mixed in without affecting some of the internal combustion engines that we use. The safe limit people in the past used to say was about 5%. I think it's about 10%, but that is typically it. So I still think, yes, you can use it to reduce the cost, but there is a limit. What we are looking at here as well is power generation. And in power generation, you can use more biomass to increase the share of renewables. Biomass would just be the waste products of the palm oil. So it could be the husk, for instance, which is being burned in a, I would say, a biomass boiler. And that's used to generate electricity. Now that is also economically viable as well as environmentally friendly. But today, most of the palm oil companies would generate the electricity for their own use, and they wouldn't opt to sell it into the electricity grid. So quite often, this electricity is basically not counted or is lost. So that is an avenue for renewables as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Further questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes.
Maybe this is discussion. I'm interested about the biomass. I was informed before that in Sumatra, I heard that they have capacity around 25 megawatts of biomass power plant. But they said it is expensive compared to that if they have to buy electricity from PLN. I asked why you run it. It's because of the requirement from the the buyers in Europe or in somewhere. It's not green. Is it that is why I tried to learn from them how to operate it, and they say, this is different from the business. It's just how we can get the business. So what do you think of this? This is the fact that I found out. That is why, and then I withdrew from biomass.
Yeah, so in a lot of these countries, why generation for biomass ends up being costly is there really isn't that whole supply chain, the fuel supply chain, like from gas or from coal. So that actually increases the cost. And yes, as correctly put, increasingly a lot of these global companies, these MNCs, they have certain renewable, RE100 goals. They want to be fully renewable, and quite often these days I have seen some of them actually willing to procure electricity at prices higher than what they can get at the grid, as long as you can prove that it's green electricity. So yes, it is more expensive, but yes, at the same time, they're also willing buyers for these things nowadays.
Also, yes, what I think there must be now. What is your thought? There are some, or maybe not some, but many companies that would be ready to buy more expensive electricity, but as long as it's renewable. The problem is to generate a renewable electricity in around the industrial area is going to be expensive. The issue in Indonesia, this is in Indonesia case, there is no such scheme that can be this electricity can be traded. So if we produce it in somewhere in like in eastern Indonesia, we cannot sell it in Jawa Barat or West Java. Maybe you have to give suggestion to the government of Indonesia to enable this scheme.
Yes, today there isn't that retail scheme where you can just produce somewhere and buy it from another place, but increasingly, yes, there's a lot of these third-party exchanges that do tracking of how many megawatts of electricity generated from a green product. It's essentially what they call renewable energy credits. It's certificates these days. So there's these third-party platforms where such things can be traded off the market, more or less out of regulations. It's really just this commitment certain companies have to want to, I guess, do their part for the environment, or at the same time, do their part to supporting some of these renewable projects. So it's off the market, it's out of the regulations, just financial transaction. So in some way, you can think of it as this, let's say some of these MNCs, these global companies that want a renewable target, they are supporting renewable developments in a sense. It might not be electricity that they are getting directly or even in the market. And sometimes there are players that are actually getting renewable energy credits from overseas at the same time. So you can still be green in a sense without getting the electricity even domestically or connected to you. So that's an avenue.
But I think what I've noticed as well is there's been a trend and a movement away from renewable energy credits to companies that really want to make a difference and procure 100% renewables. You know, we've seen companies like Google in Singapore, for instance, they've started to support solar panels on rooftops on a large scale basis, signing power purchase contracts with them in order to generate enough electricity so that they can say that they're only using green energy worldwide. So that's something they've done in Singapore, there's something they've done in Taiwan, and they're doing it in the US as well. And we will begin to see more and more of these companies because They feel that they need to be socially responsible. They feel that they need to report their carbon emissions and try to reduce it in order to be part of the solution. And that is why it's driving this growth to renewables as well. But you're right, sometimes it will not be cheap. It will be more expensive. These are the first movers. If you look 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the cost will keep coming down. The cost will never go back up. It will keep coming down. And that's why the future is really renewables.
Oh yes. I think mine is not necessarily a question, but about a comment.